Every offseason, NFL teams try and improve their rosters with the eventual goal to win a Super Bowl. And with 32 NFL teams, some teams are naturally going to be further away from winning a Super Bowl than others. And the old adage of how to build a roster is to build through the NFL draft and to supplement in free agency. And I am a big subscriber to that belief, but free agent signings can often be the difference between a team finishing 10-7 and losing in the divisional round and finishing 12-5 and winning the Super Bowl. And look no further than the 2024 Eagles, who went out and signed Saquon Barkley, Mekhi Becton, and Zach Bond all in free agency. The Eagles roster was already good before signing those guys, but do the Birds win 14 games in the regular season and then win the Super Bowl without those three players on the roster? I would say probably not, and that's a good example of how NFL free agency can push teams over the top. And in today's video, we're going to grade the biggest free agent signings from the 2025 offseason so far. And with NFL free agency, these aren't rookies getting accustomed to the NFL. These are guys that have been around for several years, and with big money free agents, you expect contribution immediately. And a lot of the grading will be based off of the amount the player was paid and how they have performed so far. And there's a lot to dive into in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing Rams receiver Davante Adams. Davante Adams was a free agent after being released by the New York Jets in March in what was an eventful 12 months for him. He had originally wanted to go to Las Vegas to play with the Raiders and his former college teammate Derek Carr, and after the 2022 season, Derek Carr was released by the Raiders. Davante played 2023 with a combination of Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo, and after a few games into the 2024 season, Adams requested a trade and was eventually traded to the New York Jets to reunite with his former Packers teammate Aaron Rodgers. And despite only playing in 14 games last year, he still logged over 1,000 yards for the 5th straight year, and due in large part to how big his contract would have been in 2025, he was released by the Jets this offseason. And Adams signed a 2-year, $44 million deal with the Los Angeles Rams, and with the Rams already having Puka Nacua and of course Matt Stafford, this was a very big sign because this instantly put Puka and Davante as one of the best receiving duos in all of football. And in 7 games in 2025, Adams has 431 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns, which would have him on pace for just over 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns over the course of a 17-game season. Now, we have to note that the touchdown numbers are a little skewed, as Davante most recently had a 3-touchdown game against the Jags in London, so credit where it's due, but naturally that's going to skew the numbers quite a bit in the touchdown department. But all things considered, Tay has been a really good receiver for the Rams so far, and even with the 3-touchdown game, Davante still leads the NFL in red zone targets, so maybe that is a sign of things to come. But regardless, he is still a really good player at 32 years old, and has a good combination of route running, football IQ, and being savvy enough to still get open at his age. And believe it or not, he's actually caught less than 50% of his targets in 2025, which is a number I think will go up over the course of the season and kind of revert to the mean of his career, which is a 62.9% catch rate. So I still think the best is yet to come for Davante Adams. Now, he was signed to a 2-year, $44 million contract, so the grade is based off of that and not comparing him to other receivers around the NFL that may be more productive. And the Rams have their number 2 receiver who can and has proven he can step up when Puka Nacua is out, and a guy who could easily have 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. And for me personally, this was everything the Rams could have asked for when they signed Davante Adams, and I think this is an A+ grade. Now, staying in the NFC West for another receiver, and it's Cooper Kupp of the Seahawks. Cooper Kupp is an interesting free agent to grade because 7 games in, he hasn't been that good for Seattle and has just 2 games with more than 4 receptions. But like we always say on the channel, context means everything, and it also doesn't help Kupp specifically that Jackson Smith-Njigba is having the year he is. And for reference, JSN is on pace for 1,989 receiving yards, which would break the single season record, and has 5 100-yard games in the first 7 weeks of the year. Naturally, that's going to have an effect on how many yards Kupp has through 7 games. And after going back and watching Cooper Kupp's routes and watching him on tape, I don't think he's a bad player and that he's washed by any means. Sure, he's not the Triple Crown version of himself from 4 years ago, but I still think he could be a 1,000-yard player in the right offense, and at the moment, he is on pace for just 58 receptions for 711 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is not exactly what the Seahawks envisioned when they signed Kupp. They gave him a 3-year, $45 million contract, and the big reason why Cooper Kupp isn't getting as many targets as he would probably like is a good reason from a team standpoint, again because of JSN, and that's what makes this difficult to grade. Based on production, I think this is a C+, but like we said, Seattle is clearly a contender and there needs to be a lot of context with this grade. Next up is Dan Moore, the left tackle for the Tennessee Titans. Now, I will be honest, whenever this signing was made, I was very critical of this signing for the Titans. I thought, why would you give an $80 million contract to Dan Moore of all left tackles, and especially with 50 of it being guaranteed? Now, I will be fair in the sense with this signing that we have been with other signings and kind of ask the question, does the Dan Moore contract specifically prohibit the Titans from extending any other player they have on their roster currently? And the answer is no, and that's kind of because the Titans roster isn't very good and it's not exactly plentiful with young talent to be able to receive large second contracts. But all things considered, whenever you look at the 2025 Titans, Dan Moore is far from the problem. Now, there have been a couple of reps in particular where guys kind of slow play him at the line of scrimmage and then kind of burst inside and kind of catch Dan Moore with cement in his feet, if you will. And there was one really bad rep that he had against Danielle Hunter, and personally I would say that that was a better rep by Danielle Hunter than it was a true bad rep by Dan Moore. And Danielle Hunter's a player that has over 100 career sacks. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler and could very easily finish his career with 130, 140 career sacks and could very well make the Hall of Fame. So for him to get Dan Moore one time, is that really such a horrendous thing in the grand scheme of things? I don't think so. And all things considered, while Dan Moore has allowed 5 sacks in the first 7 weeks of the 25 season, I don't think Dan Moore has played all that bad. And again, to at least be fair to Dan Moore specifically, you have to remember that Cam Ward is holding onto the ball a lot more than other quarterbacks would, and there's certainly times where Cam Ward should have gotten rid of the ball a lot faster than he has, and all things considered, I think Dan Moore has played fine. Not great, not elite, but fine, and I think he's played a lot better than what I thought he was going to heading into the 25 season, and 7 weeks into the 2025 season, we give this grade a B-. And one thing that I do want to clarify with Dan Moore was the Titans needed a floor-raising left tackle to move on from the years of Dennis Daly and with Nicholas Petit-Frere along their offensive line, and all things considered, Dan Moore has done a solid job of that. Again, like we said, he hasn't been an elite left tackle, but he's done a solid enough job, especially with a number 1 overall pick at quarterback. Now, one player that I think has surpassed everyone's wildest expectations as a free agent signing is Cowboys running back Javonte Williams. And full transparency, whenever the Cowboys signed Javonte Williams, obviously there's hundreds of free agent signings every year, and whenever they signed him, I was kind of like, okay, great, they brought in Javonte Williams, hopefully he has a decent year, but my honest thoughts were that this was going to be pretty similar to how the Texans run game has looked in 2025, and that Dak Prescott was going to need a 5,000 yard type season throwing to CeeDee Lamb, and that CeeDee was going to have a 16 or 1700 yard type year, because I didn't think the Cowboys would have a run game. But Javonte Williams in 7 games already has a career high in rushing touchdowns with 6, and whether you know this or not, he is currently second in the NFL in rushing yards, only behind Jonathan Taylor, who is very much on the way to an offensive player of the year caliber type year. And if it wasn't a quarterback award, JT should probably be in the MVP discussion. So for the type of year Javonte Williams is having, and especially for what the Cowboys signed him for, which was a 1-year deal worth $3 million, this is by every definition an A+ grade for the Cowboys and the signing of Javonte Williams. And I know the Cowboys at times are in the news for all the wrong reasons, like the Micah Parsons trade and how they could have paid him a couple of years ago, but this was a really good signing by the Cowboys, and the George Pickens trade was also a really good trade for Dallas, and Jerry Jones does a lot of things right. It's just the media would rather report the Micah Parsons, and it's obviously a lot easier to poke fun at Jerry than it is to give credit to Jerry for things that he does, but this was a really good signing by the Cowboys, and 7 games in, Javonte Williams looks to be a 1,000 yard back and a guy that could easily rush for 12 or 13 touchdowns this year. Stefon Diggs of the Patriots is up, and the New England Patriots were very active this offseason in free agency, and they actually signed 2 of the top 4 free agents this cycle in terms of average annual value. Not in terms of guarantees, but in terms of average annual value, as Diggs signed a contract worth a little north of $21 million per year if he plays out the entirety of the contract, and Milton Williams signed a 4-year, $104 million contract, which is an AAV of $26 million per year. So there was a lot of expectations for Stefon Diggs Diggs to come in and be the number one receiver in New England. And there was a boat incident this offseason with Stefon Diggs that went viral, and there was a big video about it. And if you were a Patriots fan, I feel like there was two ways to feel about that specific incident. One, our receiver is going to be a diva, our wide receiver one more specifically, is going to be a diva, and he's going to ball out on the field when he returns. Or the opposite, that he's coming off of a torn ACL, he's in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and that this is going to be a long year. But 7 games in, Diggs has played really well, and he's actually hauled in 39 of 44 targets in 2025, and that is an insane catch percentage, so credit to Stefon Diggs. And the game that he had against Buffalo and his return to Buffalo was a tremendous outing, and in terms of public image, in terms of really helping just boost his stock, if you will, he did a tremendous job that night. He was interviewed before the game, he said all the right things, and to basically say, keep your eyes glued to the screen, it's going to be an entertaining game, and the Patriots ended up winning in Buffalo, and Diggs has been everything that the Patriots could have hoped for, both in terms of his production, but in also helping out their young quarterback in Drake May. And while Drake May obviously has to make the plays and has to be able to, fit balls in tight windows, Stefon Diggs has also played a tremendous job in help aiding his young career along. So Diggs has been everything the Patriots could have hoped for, and specifically over the last 4 games, he's had 2 100-yard games, and if he were to keep these last 4 games up based on a 17-game season, he would be on pace for nearly 1,500 yards. I'm not going to kill the Diggs grade because he doesn't have a receiving touchdown in the first 7 games, and I think the receiving touchdowns will come, but he's been everything that the Patriots could have hoped for, and I would personally give this an A+ grade. Daniel Jones is up, and he signed a 1-year deal with the Colts worth up to $14 million. And prior to signing with the Colts, Daniel Jones was a first-round letdown. This was a player that was running scout team practice reps with the Giants last year and eventually signed with the Vikings practice squad during the 2024 season. And Jones was offered a contract by the Vikings this offseason, but felt he had a better chance to succeed or to compete in Indy, and he bet on himself. And through 7 games, he won, and then some. And we've discussed this several times on the channel, but the Colts are 6-1 and are 1 play away from being 7-0. And while Jonathan Taylor is having an offensive player of the year caliber year, Daniel Jones is also playing phenomenal football. He has 14 total touchdowns in 7 games and is on pace for a 24 passing touchdown, 10 rushing touchdown season, along with over 4,500 total yards. Now, entering training camp, the belief was that it was going to be a competition between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, and admittedly, because of everything the Colts had invested in Anthony Richardson, I thought AR was going to be the guy, at least initially. But if Daniel Jones was playing anything close to what he is now in training camp, then we know this was never even close to a competition, because Anthony Richardson has never came close to playing like this. And I've said it several times already, but the Daniel Jones situation was one of the most wrong I've been in 2025. I thought this was punting on the season in a lot of ways, and in a somewhat of a defense to myself, I think it is fair to say nobody saw this type of season coming, and nobody would have believed that heading into week 8, Daniel Jones would have the same MVP odds as Dak Prescott, and even better odds than Jordan Love and Lamar Jackson. And the only question for the Colts this offseason, assuming DJ doesn't fall off a cliff at some point, and that this player is here to stay, is how big of a contract does he get? And not surprisingly, for a 1-year deal worth up to $14 million, this is an A+. The Patriots signed defensive tackle Milton Williams from the Super Bowl champion Eagles, and everyone knew at the time that they overpaid for the player Milton was with Philadelphia. Now, I wasn't critical of giving Milton Williams a $100 million contract, and my reasoning was pretty simple. Do you think there's anybody currently on the Patriots roster that they could not pay because of the contract? And the answer is no, and they could get out of it after 2 years, so it really didn't matter that, in theory, they overpaid a bit for Williams. That's what happens when players go to the open market. But even through 7 games, obviously Drake May is getting a lot of love nationally, as he rightfully should, but the Patriots defense has also been doing a really good job, and some of that is due to Milton Williams. And having a good defensive tackle duo in Christian Barmore and Milton Williams, and by the way, I'm very glad to see Christian Barmore back on the field and healthy again, well, you sometimes have a team that's 3rd in average in yards per carry against, and 5th in points allowed per game. Now, Milton Williams specifically has not had the most impact on the stat sheet as he has 20 total tackles in 7 games, along with 19 pressures and 3.5 sacks, and there is some validity to the people that say the Patriots overpaid for the production they specifically received from Milton Williams, but with this franchise in their specific situation, I'm fine with it. Admittedly, Williams has not been a top 2 or 3 individual defensive tackle this year, so I think that brings the grade down a little bit, but he's still been a really good player, and Patriots fans would do this signing again in a heartbeat. And about midway through the year, we give this an A-. Sam Darnold of the Seattle Seahawks is up, and this signing through 7 games is everything that Seahawks fans could have possibly hoped for and more. And whenever this signing was made, there was definitely a little bit of questioning within the Seahawks fan base of, great, we are getting rid of Geno Smith for Sam Darnold. Is this a one-year wonder type player? Are we going to get the type of player that the Vikings had for most of the 2024 season? Or is he going to revert to Jets and Panthers Sam Darnold? And 7 games in, Darnold is a legit MVP candidate. What's honestly kind of funny is 50% of the interceptions, or 2 of the interceptions that he's thrown, weren't exactly his fault. There was one interception within the Steelers game where they were running a play-action play, and when Sam Darnold came out of the play-action, Cam Hayward was right in his face, and it's a pretty scary sight to see a 300-pound man running directly at you, knowing his sole job and goal is to drive you into the turf for a very hard hit. So Darnold did what I thought was a logical decision, to throw the ball, and given that Cam Hayward's hands are probably the size of a steering wheel, his paw got on the football, it popped right up in the air, and Nick Herbig got the interception. So I wouldn't exactly say that that was Sam Darnold's fault for an interception, and the other interception was in the Bucs game where he was throwing a pass to A.J. Barner, and it was a very weird play. It was kind of like throwing a rock across water, if you've ever, really skidded a rock across water, where the ball hit off of a lineman's helmet, and it went straight into Lavonte David's arms. And those are 2 of Darnold's 4 interceptions in the first 7 weeks of the season. Outside of the weird game against San Francisco, in which really nobody outside of Jackson Smith-Njigba caught a pass, as the second leading receiver had less than 20 receiving yards, and it was a very weird screen fest by Clint Kubiak, and he's done a tremendous job in the last 6 games of calling games and putting Sam Darnold in situations to succeed. I think this grade is probably the easiest free agent grade out of any of the signings in today's video, and not surprisingly, it is an A+. The Arizona Cardinals signed Josh Sweat to a 4-year, $76 million contract this offseason, coming off of a Super Bowl run with the Philadelphia Eagles, and all things considered, this has been a really good signing for the Cardinals so far. The main reason that I think it's been a pretty good signing for the Cardinals is you have to remember that the average annual value with Josh Sweat was $19 million per year. He was not expected to be Max Crosby at $35 million per year, or Myles Garrett at $41 million per year. And for Josh Sweat to receive the bag and set his family up for financial success for not just his generation, but what should be generations, was a really good part on his agent's behalf too, and all things considered, this was a home run for both sides. Josh Sweat is on pace for over 50 pressures and double-digit sacks, and again, he is not a tier 1 pass rusher, so all things considered, I thought the Cardinals did a really good job with the Josh Sweat signing. And we've went over this before, but I really like the vision that Monty Ossenfort has had in terms of building up the trenches on both sides of the football, whether it was trading for Baron Browning on the defensive side, or whether it was drafting Darius Robinson and Walter Nolan in each of the last 2 first rounds, or even Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency this period as well, or of course BJ Ojulari back in the second round of 2023. I really like the vision that Monty Ossenfort had from the start, and Josh Sweat has been a really good signing for the Cardinals too, and the biggest thing to remember here is the value in which they signed him for. And if you can pay a pass rusher an average of $19 million per year to generate 50 plus pressures and anywhere from 11 to 13 sacks, I know some people may feel a bit differently because Josh Sweat is not exactly a household name like a Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett, but I would personally give this an A+ grade. Now, with the Stefon Diggs contract, we mentioned that it was the 4th highest average annual value this specific free agency cycle at a little over $21 million per year. And with the Justin Fields contract, believe it or not, he was the 6th highest average annual value with a 2-year, $40 million contract, with 30 of it being guaranteed. Now, to be completely honest, I didn't hate the Justin Fields signing because you could at least understand the vision of what the Jets were trying to accomplish. Now, there are times in free agency whenever you think of a guy getting a very large contract at the clear end of his career and it doesn't work out. But this wasn't one of those situations. This was hoping that a bridge quarterback could potentially develop into a franchise quarterback, and it was only hammered home even further whenever the Jets selected Armand Membu at 7th overall. And it was basically the belief that, hey, we can place a wall in front of Justin Fields, and we know before Justin Fields takes a snap with the Jets that he has an excruciating long average time to throw compared to other NFL quarterbacks. But because we are placing a wall in front of him of very good offensive linemen, this will be fine because he's going to have more time to throw. But unfortunately, it has not worked out, and Justin Fields has been a big problem for the Jets. But one of the biggest problems for the Jets is the man who signs the check, and that is Woody Johnson, of course, the owner. And there was recently a little media thing where he was asked what the problem with Justin Fields was or what the problem with the Jets was, and it was basically that we need to be able to complete passes.
And if we can just complete a pass, it would look good. You got to complete some passes. You got to convince them that you can do something.
And obviously that's not good, and that's not something you want to see. And if you are a Jets fan watching your owner say those types of things, I really couldn't help but think that the feeling is embarrassment through all of this, and especially given the fact that you are the last winless team. And unfortunately, Justin Fields, a couple of months into the season, given that he was expected to be a bridge quarterback, and hopefully that if all things worked out, he could potentially be the Jets franchise quarterback. Well, needless to say, I know Justin Fields has not thrown an interception in the first 6 games of his Jets tenure, but if you have watched any Jets games this year, you know really outside of the Steelers game, in which the Jets put up 32 points, it's been a very excruciatingly painful experience to watch the New York Jets offense, and unfortunately the grade for this signing is an F. There are several other free agent grades from this cycle on the screen right now, but that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as we are closing in on 220,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.